For a decade, Dr. Isadora harbored a deep hatred for a woman who had devastated her life in the past. Now she finds herself with the opportunity to decide this woman's fate, whose life literally rests in her hands. As fate intertwines the paths of these two women once again, Isadora faces a dilemma: succumb to the consuming desire for revenge or let her oath as a doctor prevail. Hello my friends, I am Linda and this is the Linda's Stories channel. I hope you enjoy this story. Dr. Isadora, you're needed in the emergency department. A serious case has just arrived. A young woman involved in a car accident has just been brought in by the ambulance. Urgently announced a nurse to the renowned neurosurgeon Isadora. With her heart pounding, Isadora navigated through the bustling hospital corridors, her mind already working to anticipate the procedures she would have to perform. A woman with a severe head trauma would demand all of her skill and concentration. Before entering the operating room, Isadora took a few seconds to examine the tests, her serious expression reflecting the gravity of the situation. An emergency craniotomy surgery would be the only way to relieve the pressure on the patient's brain. Dressed and ready for action, Isadora entered the operating room, her gaze focused on the unconscious patient on the stretcher. However, the moment her eyes met the woman's pale face, Isadora felt as if time had frozen. It was impossible to believe that fate was playing with her like this. She would never forget that face, even after years. She then looked at the patient's chart and had no more doubts. It was Katerina, the woman who had shattered her life 10 years ago. An avalanche of emotions flooded Isadora at that moment. Katerina's life was now in her hands. Doctor, is something wrong? Everything is ready for surgery. Are you okay?" asked a nurse with concern, noticing Isadora's paralysis in front of the patient. Isadora blinked a few times, trying to regain control over her tumultuous emotions. "Please call Dr. Alfredo to replace me in this surgery," she requested, her voice still shaken by being in front of Katerina. The nurse frowned, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Dr. Alfredo is busy in another surgery. This patient's life depends on you, Dr. Isadora," he stated, casting upon the doctor a responsibility she never imagined having to face. The life of the woman who had shattered her world in the past was now in her hands. The doctor took a deep breath. She knew that when she chose to pursue a medical career, she took a solemn oath and committed to a duty that transcended her own feelings or personal judgments. "Let's save this woman," she declared, her firm voice echoing through the operating room. Isadora was determined to fulfill her mission, even if it meant confronting the ghosts of the past that persisted in resurfacing. It was hours of intense surgery. At that moment, the doctor was not a woman marked by a past of trauma and loss, but rather a surgeon determined to utilize all her knowledge and skills to save a life, regardless of who the patient was. And so it was. Isadora led the surgical team with mastery. At the end of the operation, the patient was stable, but the future was still uncertain. Only when she woke up would the possible sequelae reveal themselves. Isadora was aware that she had done everything within her reach in that case. She had fulfilled her oath as a doctor, putting the life and well-being of her patient above all else. After leaving the operating room and returning to her office, Isadora found herself alone, surrounded only by the silent walls and the memories that insisted on haunting her. All the firm and controlled demeanor she had maintained during the surgery now dissolved. With no witnesses, Isadora finally allowed herself to succumb to tears. As the tears still streamed down her cheeks, Isadora's mind was transported back in time, reliving that fateful day a decade ago when Katerina entered her life and stole a piece of herself. It was a Saturday morning, and Isadora had just returned home after a hectic night at the hospital. After a shift with many emergencies, she longed for a good shower and a moment of peace. However, upon opening the front door, she was greeted by a small whirlwind of a 4-year-old. Her son, Miguel, ran towards her, eyes shining with joy at seeing her. "Mommy, you're here. I need to show you the new ball Daddy gave me," exclaimed Miguel, embracing her legs enthusiastically. Isadora laughed, giving in to her son's sweetness. "Miguel, you little rascal, it's still early. You should be sleeping," she joked, running her fingers through the boy's hair. "Let's play outside with my new ball, Mommy," Miguel insisted, his eyes shining with anticipation. Isadora sighed, feeling the weight of tiredness on her shoulders, but she would never deny a moment of fun with her precious son. "All right, Miguel. I'll just take a quick shower and then we'll play with your new ball," she promised, a loving smile shining through despite the fatigue. After tucking her son back into bed and promising they would play soon, Isadora went to take her shower. The shower was a brief respite for Isadora, an attempt to relax and leave behind the tiredness from the previous night. As she got out of the shower and looked for Miguel, her heart sank when she realized he was no longer in bed. A shiver of alarm ran down her spine as she spotted her son playing with the new ball on the lawn in front of the house. Isadora rushed to the window, her breath quickening as her eyes frantically scanned the scene before her. And then, as if time had slowed down, she witnessed the tragedy unfold before her eyes. Miguel's ball rolled into the street, and before Isadora could even shout a warning, her innocent son ran after it. The sharp sound of tires screeching, followed by Miguel's strangled cry, echoed through the air, and Isadora's heart seemed to stop for a moment. The impact knocked Miguel to the ground, his small body motionless on the asphalt. The world around Isadora seemed to slow down as she ran desperately to reach her son, fear and anguish consuming her completely. There, faced with the tragedy, Isadora was no longer the renowned surgeon, but rather a desperate mother, whose heart shattered with every beat. Miguel was rushed to the hospital, surrounded by a medical team fighting to save his life. But despite all efforts, the head trauma had been too devastating. The little boy did not survive the injuries. As Isadora received the devastating news of her son's passing, the driver involved in the accident arrived at the hospital, visibly shaken. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I tried to brake, but it all happened so fast. I couldn't swerve away from your son," apologized the young driver. It was Katerina, then just 18 years old. Katerina's words echoed in the deafening emptiness that settled in Isadora's torn soul. Shock and pain mingled in a furious storm within her, and in a moment of unbearable agony, anger erupted. "You're a murderer! You took my son's life!" shouted Isadora, her voice echoing through the hospital corridors, fueled by the fire of anger and pain. "I will never forgive you. You're going to prison for the rest of your life," she declared with a merciless tone, unable to contain the torrent of emotions consuming her. Despite the thorough investigation into the accident, there was no evidence of recklessness on Katerina's part. Witnesses testified that she was within the speed limit, and that it was simply a tragic accident. However, for Isadora, the authorities' verdict and the words of the witnesses were not enough to calm the storm of emotions raging in her shattered heart. Isadora never accepted this version of events. In her tormented mind, Katerina remained responsible for the irreparable loss of her son. Even a decade after the tragedy that changed her life forever, Isadora had not found space in her heart to forgive Katerina. To her, the woman she considered responsible for her son's loss was a sinister figure devoid of redemption, someone who had nothing good to offer the world. It took time for Isadora to recover from the memories that had disoriented her, but she finally left her office and headed for the hospital exit. However, her path was interrupted when she spotted a group of children in the waiting room. "Who are these children?" Isadora asked, intrigued by their presence in the hospital. "They are students of the patient you operated on," replied the nurse with a smile. At that moment, the children noticed Dr. Isadora's presence, and their eyes lit up with excitement. "Did you save Teacher Katerina's life?" asked one of them, admiration shining in their eyes. Isadora nodded with a slight nod of her head. "Thank you, Doctor. Teacher Katerina is very good. She's like a mother to all of us at the orphanage," said the child, embracing the doctor's legs with tenderness. Isadora felt flooded with a tumultuous mix of thoughts and emotions. The woman who had always been painted as a monster in her mind was, in fact, an angel in the lives of those vulnerable children. Isadora approached one of the caregivers accompanying the children and inquired about Katerina's role in the institution. The woman explained that Katerina was a volunteer teacher at the orphanage, dedicating her life to teaching and offering care and love to the needy children who so desperately needed it. The doctor felt that reunion wasn't mere chance. It was a destined moment, an opportunity to free Katerina from all accusations, and also a chance for herself to let go of the hatred and resentment that had consumed her for so long. "The patient Katerina has awakened," announced one of the nurses. It was time. Isadora was ready. She headed to the room where Katerina was. As she entered the room, their gazes met, and Katerina immediately recognized the woman despite the 10 years that had passed. Isadora took Katerina's hand, her heart heavy with indescribable emotions. "I forgive you," she said through tears, releasing the weight of a decade of resentment. "Thank you," Katerina murmured, her voice filled with gratitude and surprise. As tears flowed, Isadora realized the liberating truth behind her words. Sometimes we keep people tied to us through the hatred we hold for them, without realizing that this feeling also imprisons us in an endless cycle of suffering. Now, Dr. Isadora felt that the past no longer stirred up negative emotions within her. Looking back, she only felt longing for her son, but no longer the weight of resentment that had consumed her for so long. In her forgiveness, she found a new freedom, a path to move forward without the shackles of the past. If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.